My name is Megan Carter, and I never thought a 5-hour flight from Denver to Orlando would turn into the most satisfying confrontation of my entire life. But that's exactly what happened on a Tuesday morning in March, somewhere over the middle of the country at 35,000 feet, with nowhere for either of us to run. I want to start by telling you a little about myself, because context matters here. I'm 34 years old. I work as a contracts manager for a mid-sized construction firm in Denver, and if there's one thing my job has taught me, it's that documentation wins arguments. People can yell, people can lie, people can twist a story 6 different ways, but a paper trail doesn't budge. I didn't know it yet, but that lesson was about to save my entire vacation. I booked this trip 4 months in advance. My sister Dana was getting married in Orlando, and I splurged on an exit row seat with extra legroom because, frankly, my knees aren't what they used to be after a car accident a few years back. I paid an extra $89 for that seat. I have the receipt. I have the email confirmation. I have the boarding pass. I want you to remember that because it's going to matter a lot in about 10 minutes. I got to the gate early like I always do because I like to people watch and sip an overpriced airport coffee before a flight. I was sitting near gate C14 scrolling through wedding day logistics on my phone when I noticed a woman near the check-in counter already causing a scene. She was maybe in her late 40s, dressed in a cream pantsuit that looked like it cost more than my monthly rent, oversized sunglasses pushed up into a perfectly highlighted blowout, and a Louis Vuitton bag that she kept setting on the counter like it was an extension of her authority. Her voice carried across the entire gate area. "I don't think you understand who I am," she was saying to the gate agent, a young guy who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I always fly this airline. I have status. There's no reason I should be in a middle seat." The agent, bless him, calmly explained that her ticket was what it was, and that upgrades were subject to availability. She huffed, grabbed her boarding pass back, and stormed toward the seating area, muttering something about how she'd deal with it on the plane. I remember thinking, glad that's not my problem, and went back to my coffee. I had no idea. Boarding started about 20 minutes later. I scanned my pass, walked down the jet bridge, and found my seat, 14C, the exit row aisle seat I had paid extra for. I settled in, put my bag under the seat in front of me, and pulled out my book. Within a few minutes, passengers were filing past, and that's when I saw her again. Cream pantsuit, sunglasses now pushed onto her head, Louis Vuitton bag swinging from her elbow. She stopped directly at my row and looked down at me like I'd parked in her reserved spot at the country club. "You're in my seat," she said. I looked up, confused, and glanced at my boarding pass still resting in my lap. "I'm sorry? This is my seat. 14C. I need the extra legroom. I have a knee condition." She said it with this practiced little catch in her voice, like she'd used that line 100 times before, and it had worked every single time. I held up my boarding pass. "I think there might be a mix-up. This is my seat. I booked it specifically for the extra legroom too. I have a knee issue myself from a car accident." She didn't even glance at my pass. She just sighed, the kind of sigh that's meant to make you feel like you're the unreasonable one. "Look, I don't have time for this. I fly constantly. I'm sure the airline can sort out, but I am not sitting in a middle seat for 5 hours. Can you just be a decent person and switch with me?" Now, here's the thing. If she had asked nicely, if she had simply said, "Hey, I have a knee problem too, would you mind?" I might have actually considered it. I'm not a monster. But the entitlement dripping off every word, the assumption that I would just fold because she demanded it, that's what set something off in me. I dealt with people like this my whole career. Clients who think yelling louder means winning. I wasn't about to fold for a stranger in a cream pantsuit. "I'm sorry you're uncomfortable," I said, keeping my voice level. "But I paid extra for this seat specifically. I'm not able to switch." Her face changed instantly. The practiced sweetness evaporated, and something sharper took its place. "Excuse me? Do you know how often I fly this route? I have platinum status. People like you don't usually even get seated in exit rows. People like you." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm because I've learned that calm is the most powerful weapon you can use against someone who wants a reaction. I'm not sure what that means, but my ticket says 14C, and that's where I'll be sitting. By now, the line behind her had backed up. A flight attendant, A woman with short gray hair and kind eyes, name tag, reading Linda, made her way over. Is there a problem here? The woman in the pantsuit spun toward her immediately, voice climbing an octave. Yes, there's a problem. This woman is in my seat and refuses to move, and frankly the customer service on this airline has been a nightmare today. Linda looked between us, calm as anything, clearly a woman who had seen this exact scene play out 1,000 times. Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass? The woman dug through her bag, pulled it out, and shoved it toward Linda like it was a winning lottery ticket. Linda studied it for a moment, then looked up.
Mom, your seat is 22E.
That's a mistake, the woman snapped. I always get exit row. Always. Someone clearly messed up my reservation. Linda, still calm, still polite, pulled up something on her tablet. I'm showing your ticket was booked in economy. No seat selection fees paid. Assigned seat 22E. This passenger, she gestured to me, paid the exit row upgrade fee for 14C. I can see that right here in the system. I felt a small, private wave of relief and satisfaction wash over me. I hadn't even needed to pull up my email confirmation. The system already had my back. The woman's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. I am not sitting in a middle seat in the back of the plane like some kind of, she stopped herself, but everyone around us could fill in the blank she didn't finish. Ma'am, Linda said, voice still even. I understand you're frustrated, but I can't move another passenger out of a seat they paid for. If you'd like, I can check if there's any other availability, but right now the flight is full. Then put her in 22E and let me have this seat, the woman said, jabbing a finger toward me like I was a piece of furniture to be rearranged. That's when I finally spoke up again, and I'll admit there was a little extra steel in my voice this time. I'm not interested in switching. I have a documented knee injury. I paid for this seat specifically because of it, and I have no obligation to give it up because you didn't book early enough to get the seat you wanted. A few passengers nearby, the people who'd been quietly watching this whole exchange while pretending to look at their phones, let out the smallest sounds of approval. Someone actually murmured, "Good for her," just loud enough for me to hear. It gave me this little jolt of courage, like I wasn't alone in this. The woman's eyes narrowed at me. Do you have any idea who my husband is? He's on the board of this airline's parent company. I could have your job. I could have you removed from this flight entirely. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I just said, then I guess you should call him because Linda here seems to be following the actual policy and am not moving. Linda, to her credit, didn't even blink at the threat. She'd clearly heard variations of that line more times than she could count. Ma'am, I need you to take your seat, 22E, so we can complete boarding. If you're not satisfied, you're welcome to file a complaint with customer relations after the flight, but right now I need this aisle clear. The woman stood there for a few more seconds, practically vibrating with fury, glaring at me like she could melt me with sheer force of will. Then, finally, she snatched her boarding pass back from Linda, muttered something under her breath that I chose not to hear clearly, and stomped toward the back of the plane, bag knocking into at least 3 other passengers' shoulders on her way. I exhaled and sank back into my seat, my heart pounding a little harder than I expected. The woman next to me in 14B, an older gentleman with reading glasses perched on his nose, leaned over slightly. Well handled, he said with a small smile, and went back to his newspaper. I thought that was the end of it. I genuinely did. I figured shed stew in the back of the plane for 5 hours, maybe complain to a flight attendant once or twice, and that would be that. I was wrong. About 40 minutes into the flight, once we'd reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign had turned off, I heard her voice again, this time from somewhere behind me, raised over the hum of the engines. I need to speak to someone in charge. This is unacceptable. I didn't turn around. I focused on my book, but I could hear Linda's voice, patient as ever, moving down the aisle to deal with whatever fresh complaint had emerged. A few minutes later, Linda appeared at my row again, crouching slightly so she could speak to me without shouting over the engine noise. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, "but the passenger in 22E is insisting we make some kind of announcement or offer compensation. I just wanted to give you a heads up in case she comes up here again. You haven't done anything wrong, for what it's worth."
Thank you, I said.
I appreciate you handling it the way you did back at the gate. Linda smiled, a tired but genuine smile. Believe me, this isn't my first time dealing with someone like her. Some people think status means the rules don't apply to them. About 20 minutes after that, sure enough, I heard footsteps coming up the aisle, and I knew without even looking who it was. She stopped right at my row again, sunglasses now fully off, mascara slightly smudged like she'd been crying, though I suspected those were angry tears rather than sad ones. "I hope you're happy," she said, voice low but venomous, clearly trying not to draw too much attention this time. "I have a charity gala tonight in Orlando, and now I'm going to be exhausted because I couldn't sleep properly in that seat." I closed my book, very deliberately, and looked at her. "I'm sorry you're tired, but that's not really something I can fix. I paid for my seat fair and square. I'm sorry you didn't." Her mouth opened like she wanted to fire back something cutting, but the man beside me, the gentleman with the newspaper, calmly spoke up without even looking up from his page. "Ma'am, I think it's time to head back to your seat. The seatbelt light could come on at any moment, and you wouldn't want to be standing in the aisle." She looked at him, looked at me, looked at the small audience of passengers in the surrounding rows who were now openly watching the exchange, and something in her seemed to deflate. Maybe it was the realization that no one here was going to side with her. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Either way, she turned without another word and walked back to her seat. The rest of the flight was blissfully uneventful, at least from where I was sitting. I read my book, dozed off for a bit, chatted with the gentleman next to me, whose name turned out to be Walter, a retired engineer heading to Orlando for his granddaughter's dance recital. He told me he had been flying for 50 years and had seen every kind of entitled passenger imaginable, but he said watching me hold my ground was one of the more satisfying things he'd witnessed in a while. It made me laugh, and honestly, it made the whole tense situation feel a little lighter. When we finally landed and the seatbelt sign dinged off, I gathered my things slowly, in no rush, letting the aisle clear out a bit before standing. As I made my way up the jet bridge, I noticed the woman in the cream pantsuit standing off to the side near the gate, arguing with another airline employee, a woman in a navy blazer with a customer relations badge clipped to her lapel. I caught just a fragment of the conversation as I passed. "I want that flight attendant written up," the woman was saying. "And I want compensation for my seat." This was a completely unacceptable experience. The customer relations rep, an unbothered, professional-looking woman, was nodding along in that practiced way people do when they're listening but not really agreeing with anything. "I understand your frustration, ma'am. I'll pull up your file and we can discuss your options." I kept walking. I didn't need to hear the rest. Whatever happened with her complaint, I knew the facts were on record. ID paid for my seat. She hadn't. The flight attendant had followed protocol. There was nothing for her to win. I found out a few days later, actually, just how that whole thing played out because of a strange little twist of fate. My sister Donna's wedding reception was at a hotel ballroom downtown, and during the cocktail hour, while I was chatting with one of Donna's co-workers, a woman named Carla, I happened to mention the whole airplane incident as a funny story. Carla's eyes went wide. "Wait," she said, cream pantsuit, sunglasses, talked about a husband on some airline board? "That's exactly her," I said, baffled. "How do you know that?" Carla laughed so hard, she nearly spilled her wine. "Megan, that's Vanessa Whitfield. She's like infamous in our circle. She's been banned from 2 country clubs for screaming at staff. Her husband isn't even on any airline board, he sells insurance. She just says that to everyone because she thinks it sounds impressive." I nearly choked on my drink. All that bluster, all that talk about getting someone fired, about having connections, and it had been complete fiction the entire time. It honestly made the whole situation even more satisfying in hindsight. She hadn't just been entitled. She'd been lying through her teeth the entire time, probably hoping the sheer force of her confidence would bully someone, anyone, into giving up something that wasn't hers to take. I think about that flight sometimes when I'm having a rough day at work, when a client is trying to bully me into cutting corners or bending rules that exist for a reason. I think about Linda's calm, unwavering professionalism. I think about Walter quietly backing me up, without even looking up from his newspaper. And I think about how good it felt to simply hold my ground, politely, firmly, and let the facts speak for themselves. Because here's the thing about people like Vanessa. They're used to getting their way through sheer volume, through threats, through the assumption that everyone around them will fold rather than deal with the discomfort of confrontation. But the moment you refuse to fold, the moment you calmly say no and let the truth do the talking, all that bluster collapses in on itself. She didn't have status. She didn't have a powerful husband. She just had an attitude and a designer bag, and neither of those things were going to get her my seat. I made it to my sister's wedding well-rested, with full use of my knees, in the exit row seat I paid for, and Vanessa Whitfield, wherever she ended up sitting, spent 5 hours stewing in a middle seat she'd earned through her own refusal to plan ahead. Some might call that karma. I just call it sitting where you're supposed to sit.